Covered in this section, we're going to make some final fixes, including to the window materials, plant materials, wall materials, ground mesh changes. We're going to fix the light fixture's color map, and we're going to add a plain skybox around the environment. So when you look out the window, you don't see the horizon color. You'll see a dark skybox. First thing I notice is that this one piece of sheet metal lying on the ground has a black top to it. It's because if you remember when we duplicated all of the center pieces of sheet metal and flipped the normals to make everything double-sided, we also made the piece of sheet metal on the ground double-sided, which is kind of a waste of faces since you're only going to be able to see the top side. So I'm going to find the piece of sheet metal that's facing down, and I'm just going to delete those faces. Simple enough. Just deleted one side of that piece of sheet metal, so only the top side exists. So that saves us on a couple of faces. And I'm just cruising around the environment, looking for things that I need to change or fix. And here we have the windows that we did not bake AO maps for. We're just simply going to change the materials for these and make them darker. So I'm going to go into the layer with all of the windows. And I join them all together. And go into the material settings. I'm going to change the intensity down to about 0.7, just to match the window frames around them, make them blend into the environment better. Now I went into the plant file. I selected the plant. I'm changing the emit value down to 0.3 and the intensity value of the diffuse down to 0.2, just to make this blend into the environment better. I'm going to open up the warehouse again and see if they look better now. And the plants on the side here are still a little bit bright. We're going to darken them up by adding a new material. Now I selected the plant along the wall and made that instance a real object by pressing Ctrl+A and selecting Make Duplicates Real. Now I'm also going to select the plant next to it in the dark area, and I'm going to do the same thing, making that instance real and deleting the empty. Now with both of those plants selected, I want to join them together, but first I have to make them editable. So I simply duplicate them, and then I join those two together, and I'm going to delete the originals behind them. I'm also going to take the third plant there, which is also somewhat in the dark area, and I'm going to join it with the other two plants, So now that I have one mesh with 3 plants in it, I'm going to create a new material for it. So in the material settings, instead of the icon with the arrow, I'm going to press the plus sign. So I don't want to make the plant material local, I want to create a new material. I'm going to call it Plant Dark. I'm going to change the diffuse down to 0.2 and the emit value up down to 0.2 so that they're darker than all the other plants because they're in a darker section. I select the puddle. I'm going to play with the color ramp again. I just changed the alpha value up to 1 on the slider on the left. I'm moving it over a bit. Again, we're just going for that cool Fresnel looking effect when you're looking at the puddle from low to the ground. Now I'm just changing the ground a bit, adding a few subdivisions here and there to make the outline of the puddles a little bit more detailed. Making those plants a little bit darker, I changed the emit value down to 0.12. Now let's work with these decals. Off camera I had tried to use object color, but that ended up not working so well. So I'm just going to edit the material settings and change the intensity value down to 0.5. Since they're all pretty much in the shadows, we don't have to add a new material for it. So I simply just change the diffuse intensity down to 0.5 and they all blend in pretty well. If you notice some of the cross beams along the panes of the window there was something strange about them. The vertical ones were appearing in front of the center one despite the fact that they intersect each other. That's because we have alpha enabled for the window frame as well as the window panes. So what we want to do is give the wooden frame of this window its own material with transparency disabled, and that's going to fix that alpha sorting problem. So now I'm going to select all of the window panes by selecting one face of one of the window panes, going to the select menu, and we're going to try and select all of these panes at once by selecting similar and then going down to area. So we selected all of the faces with the same area. Some of the faces aren't selected though, so that wasn't a perfect choice. So I'm going to hold shift, select another window pane that wasn't selected. I'm going to go to similar in the select menu and choose area again, and that should select the rest of them. So now all of our window panes are selected. I'm going to press P to separate those from the mesh. I'm going to select the wooden frame of the windows, and I'm going to create a new material for them. I'm going to call this material Windows No Trans. And I'm going to disable transparency, and that's going to fix that alpha problem. So now back in global view, I'm going to press P for game mode and make sure everything looks good, and it does. Now we have a little problem with the baking on the wall here. So I'm just going to go into the AO map and see where that is. And we're just simply going to take that image in Photoshop and we're going to paint over it instead of rebaking. And that's going to fix it. So the error is on walls AO. I'm just going to pull that into Photoshop and paint over it. And we're going to reload it in Blender, and that should fix it. I'm using the clone brush to mimic all the grain around the wall. And because it's just an AO map, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Just get it as good as you can. A little blotchiness here and there is not going to be noticed at all. So I'm going to save that and reload it. Voila. Now from top view, I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to stretch this over the whole environment. Since this environment is contained in the interior, and the character won't be able to walk outside, we don't have to create a huge world outside. So I'm just creating a box, and it's going to have a simple dark color to it, so that when you look out the window, you don't see the horizon color. You in fact see the dark color of this box. So with that box selected, I'm going to create a new material called Skybox. I'm going to enable shadeless in the shading panel, and I'm just going to change the color to whatever color I want the outside to be. This case is probably going to have a slight blue tint, but be mostly a dark gray. I'm going to disable exclude mist in the options panel so that the skybox is affected by mist. Now I enable it again just to see how that looks. But it looks kind of out of place when you're at the far end of the environment and you look down, and through the window you can see that dark purple color. So I do keep exclude mist disabled so that the skybox is affected by the mist. And now these are just final checks of the environment. I'm going around looking for intersections or material errors or texture errors and things of that nature. In game mode, one thing I noticed is that the skybox wasn't appearing outside the windows. It's because the normals were facing outside, whereas we want them on the inside. So I just selected the skybox, I selected all of the vertices in edit mode, I pressed W, and I selected flip normals. So we just had to flip the normals of the skybox to the inside. And as you can see in game mode right there, everything appeared correctly. The skybox was visible outside the window. One thing I noticed by looking at the normal map on the barrel here is that the bumps are going the wrong way. That's because you have to go into the mesh buttons and change the enabled UV layer to color instead of light. So the color UV layer has to be highlighted on all of the objects in the scene for the normal maps to appear correctly. It's a weird little thing. I don't know if that's a glitch or an error or a mistake or what on Blender's part, but all we have to do is simply go through, select all the objects, and change the highlighted UV layer to color instead of light. Now I'm going to open up the lights blend file. We're going to fix the color map for the light bulb, because if you remember, we added a glow map to it, but a glow map doesn't go past 100% illumination of the color map. So the color map itself, the light bulb has to be a bright white in order for it to appear bright white in the game. So I'm just going to go into the textures folder and I'm going to open up the color map for the light, which is called light col. And we're just going to select the light bulb area and crank up the level so that's really bright, maybe a couple of dirt smudges. So I'm going to make a selection around the light bulb area. Go into image, adjust levels, crank it up really bright. And simply save that, and we'll reload it and see how that looks with our glow map. So that backside there should be pretty bright. It should turn out to be almost entirely white, which is how you would expect a light bulb to be when the light is turned on. So there we go, that fixes our color map. There's a little bit of a black seam, that's because there wasn't enough of a margin around the UVs, so I just selected all the UVs and I shrunk them a bit to get rid of that little black seam that was in the middle of the light bulb that I noticed. I'm going to go through and I'm going to shrink down all these plants. They were way too big for the kind of plant that we made. So I'm just going to select all the instances, press the S button to scale them down, real small along the ground. For the plants that we joined together and made as real meshes, I'm going to have to go into edit mode and select these one by one, shrink them down and move them into the ground. And that should do it for the final fixes.